Hi everyone, in this video we're going to talk about the chapter 8, Application, the Costs of Taxation. This is a book of Principles of Economics of Gregory. So first of all, we're going to talk about the deadweight laws of taxation. So we have to remember in chapter 6 that we represent about the effect of taxes, and mainly the taxes affect both sides. It means that it doesn't matter which side of the market is going to be charged with a tax. So I mean, if the tax is charged in the supply or in the demand, the effect is going to be paid for both sides. It just depends how it's going to be split between both sides. It depends on the elasticity of each curves. If you have any doubt, you can go to chapter 6 to understand a little bit more about this information. But the main point is like taxes, they affect both sides. Remember, when the tax is levied on buyers, the curve moves downward by the size of the tax. So it means that, remember that we are talking about the demand, when there is a shock, where is bad to the demand, automatically the curve moves downward. So this is the case of the tax. So the curve goes to the down, which means basically to the left as well. In the other side, when the tax is levied on sellers, the supply curve chips upward by the amount of the tax. So it's going to be contracted, the supply curve to the left as well, or to upward, which can be considered as well. Let's see how it works better. So here we have the supply and demand curve. We don't mind too much about elasticity. We just talk about the normal curve. Okay, so here we have the equilibrium. Okay, the equilibrium point is where the demand is exactly the same as the supply. So we have P1 and Q1. Afterwards, we experience an increase in the price, so which is given by the tax. So what is here? What is here about? So here we are not interested about a movement of the supply, which it means if it's going to be levied and supply, the curve is going to shift to upward, so it's going to be over here. Okay, and the other side, this, if we're talking about the demand, is going to be levied on buyers. So in this case, we will see that the demand curve, it will go to downward, or practically to the left. Okay, so the main point here is like this distance from P2 to P3 is basically the size of the tax. So here we have, with the tax, the consumers, they have to pay P2 instead of paying P1. Okay, but this quantity, this higher price, is not going to be received completely by the producers. They will just perceive P3. So the difference, P2 minus P3, is the tax, is the value of the tax. And with this tax, we'll see here how the market faces a lower quantity demanded and produced in the market. So here is the quantity with tax, Q2, and Q1 without tax. So here is the size of the tax. And here we have the quantity. So we can infer here, we can have here the revenue from the government. So the government revenue with the tax, which is basically how much the government charges with this one, P2 minus P3, and how many quantities the does the market uh, sell and produce, which is basically this one. So if we multiply both, we have this rectangle, which is the revenue of the government. Okay, so how a tax affects market participants. So first, we know that there is a benefit which is received by buyers in a market. So we know that they have a benefit. How we can measure this benefit from the buyer side? So basically this is measured by consumer surplus. So this is important keyword, consumer surplus. So basically the amount that buyers are willing to pay for the good minus the amount they actually pay for it. So it is basically the difference. So we know when the price is higher, this means that the consumers, they have to pay more. So if the consumers, they have to pay more, it means that they will have a less consumer surplus. On the other side, the benefit received by sellers in a market is measured by producer surplus. So we have consumer surplus and we have the other side, which is producer surplus. So this is basically the amount sellers receive for the good minus the cost. So basically they have, for example, in the initial point, they sell the goods as in a higher price, but due to the taxes, the sellers, they have to sell in a lower price. So we see here how the producer surplus is less because of the tax. And the third party in this example is the government. The government, they weren't um, present in the equilibrium part, because they didn't perceive any revenue. But with the tax, they will have now revenue, so they are now participants in the market. So this is basically measured by T, which is the price of the tax, times the quantities the market produces and the market buys. Okay, so here we are going to study with a graph which is really instructive, the welfare without and with tax. So here we have the supply again, and here we have the demand. So here we have the initial. Okay, so here maybe think, okay, so here is P3. Okay, so here don't pay attention to this, because actually it's kind of wrong, because here the price without tax actually is P3. Okay, here is P3. The P2 is the price paid by buyers, which is correct, and this is going to be the price which is received by the sellers. Okay, this is going to be, actually it's going to be P1. Okay, just like one order of these P's. Okay, so Q1 is the quantity without tax and Q2 is the quantity with tax. So how we can measure? Here, if you see here, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different figures inside, which is they are going to be important in order to analyze our welfare without and with tax. Here we have the first triangle, which is measure A, which is basically the cut of the demand curve with the y-axis, which is the price, and here with the P2. Remember that the P2 is the price paid by buyers, and here Q2 they are the quantities after the tax or with tax. Here we have B, which is basically the base of this rectangle is the Q2, which is the quantities with tax, and this high is going to be measured by P2 minus P3. By P2, remember, is the price paid by buyers after the tax, and P3 is the equilibrium price. Okay, the equilibrium price. Here we have the part C, which is basically the basis, the difference between the quantities Q1 and Q2, and this is going to be the high here is going to be the difference P2 minus P3. Here we have D, the D part, which is basically the base Q2, and the high is going to be the equilibrium price, which is P3 without tax, and P1, which is going to be the price which is going to be received by producers. We have E, which is going to be measured by the base, exactly the same as C, but the high is going to be difference, the price received by producers minus the equilibrium price. And the last one is going to be Q2, which is going to be the base of this triangle, and the difference is going to be the cut of the supply curve with the price or the y-axis, and difference with P1, which is the price received by the producers. So here what we have here, remember that this is going to measure all the area which is up the curve in the demand side. It is considered as the consumer surplus. It's kind of saving, if you want to see this point like that. And the other part is basically what is down to the curve, which is going to be kind of benefit of the firm. So this is going to be considered part of the producer surplus. So here what we can measure here is the consumer surplus. So what was the consumer surplus without tax? It was A, B, C. Why? Because we have the equilibrium price, which is P3, and the quantities Q1. So here along this part of the curve there were a lot of consumers that they even can pay these prices in order to consume, but actually because of the market they don't have to pay this price. Actually they just have to pay P3, which is lower than the prices that this part of consumers they are willing to pay. So for this reason, A plus B and plus C, they are part of the consumer surplus. The next one is producer surplus. So they are this is basically D, E, F. Why? Basically because along this part of the supply curve, the producer they even can produce at this price, okay, but actually these producers they don't have to produce at this price because the market guarantee them a price of P3. So for this reason there is a producer surplus, pardon, of D, E, and F. So we have D plus E plus F. This is the producer surplus. Now what about the tax revenue without tax? Okay, basically it's known. There is no tax revenue because in the equilibrium without tax, there is no tax. So it means if there is no tax, there is no government. So how we can measure the total surplus of the market? So here it's going to be measured by the consumer surplus plus the producer surplus. So it's going to be A plus B plus C, which is the consumer surplus side, plus D plus E plus F. So this is the total surplus of the market. So now we're going to figure out what happened with tax. So with tax, remember that the consumers they don't have to pay more P3, so because of the tax they have to pay a higher price, which is P2. So in this part we see how just this part of the curve they are willing to pay even more for consuming this good, but because of the market or because of the government, they don't have to pay this price. They have to pay even less, which is P3, P2, which obviously is higher than P3. But even though we have here that there is like kind of saving less, but there are still consumers that they're willing to pay even more, but they have to pay P2. So the consumer surplus now with tax is going to be A. Now, what about the P surplus? It's going to be F. Why? Here, this is going to be the price which is going to be charged to the consumers. It would be nice if producers they will receive P2, but no, they have to receive less because part of this income is going to be given to the government. So they are going to receive just P1 because remember P2 minus P1 is going to be considered the tax, the size of the tax. So here we have here how producers that they are along this part of the curve, they actually they are willing to produce even to this price lower than P1. So we see here how these people around or along this part of the curve, they don't have to produce a price lower than P1. They're going to receive P1. So we see here how F is considered the producer surplus. Now what about the tax revenue? Remember that the size of the tax is going to be this one, P2 minus P1. So this is going to be the price that's going to be received, or the money that's going to be received for each unit from the market. So you have to figure out how many times you're going to receive this one. So it's going to be received by the quantities that they're going to produce. It's going to be received by 2. So this is like the base and this is like the height. So we have here B plus D as a measure of welfare for the government is going to be B plus D. So if you notice, this B was before from the consumer side, okay, and this D was previous from the producer side. So now it's going to be taken by the government, and now you're like understanding, or you're like taking into account that this CE is going to be taken for anyone, okay, and we will see a little bit ahead about that. So here we see how total surplus is A plus F plus B plus D. And what about the change? We have here the consumer surplus, which is going to be reduced by B plus C, because this is going to be given B to the government and C is going to be like kind of lost. The next one is going to be producer surplus, which is going to be given D plus E is going to be the change because they will have after the tax just F, and the government they will be the unique that they're going to be better because they will receive B plus D. And if you notice here in this tax, in the total welfare, we don't see C neither E, okay, so this is the CE that's going to be lost after the tax. So this one CE is considered as the dead weight loss, okay, so they are considered like the transactions, the potential transaction, they're going not to be carried out after the tax. So this is the loss of the tax. So remember that the equilibrium is going to be affected by external party which in this case is the government. So we see how the total welfare is reduced. We can like the determinants of the deadweight loss. So here we have like several cases. Here we have the first case, which is inelastic supply. So let's imagine a case with inelastic supply. Remember, inelastic supply is a supply that it doesn't respond too much to the changes in prices. So it doesn't matter how much the price changes, but the quantities they are not going to vary too much. So here we have the initial case which is this one is the equilibrium, and imagine that here is the size of the tax, okay, which is going to be a standard, or is going to be the same for the examples that we are going to see. So here, this is remember this triangle, this is going to be the deadweight loss. So here is kind of small, okay, is not like too large. And here we have the other side of inelastic demand. Remember, inelastic demand is another like analogous case of supply of inelastic supply. We see how from changes in price is going to be a really higher response from the quantity side. So here we have the same size, and we see here that both they are kind of equivalent. So we can like conclude that there's kind of small. So just keep in mind, we are saying here that when there is inelastic curves, the impact of attacks measured with the deadweight loss is going to be low. But what about elastic curves? So here we have elastic curve, which is the supply. What is an elastic supply? You can figure out on the previous chapters, but basically is where when the change in price, it means that the quantities they change a lot. So here we have the same size of the tax, because remember we are taking into account the same like money that the government they're going to charge for this good. And we see here, because of the distance from this to this part is going to be more affected to quantities. So we see here, when the elastic supply, there is going to be a large deadweight loss, and the elastic demand, sorry, I didn't change here. So when there is a here the supply is the white one and the green one is the demand. So we see here how with the same size of the tags, we will see how it's going to be analogous to this one. So this concludes that when there are inelastic curves, there is going to be a small deadweight loss. But when there is elastic supply or elastic demand, we see here how with the same tags there's going to be a deadweight loss. So which basically it concludes that the total welfare of the market is going to be more affected with elastic curves, okay. And here we have the deadweight loss and tax revenue as taxes vary. So here, okay, we already saw about the deadweight loss, and we want to see here about the tax revenue, how it behaves. So here we have again the price. We return to the standard curves, not too elastic, not too inelastic. So here we have the supply and demand. Remember, here we have the equilibrium prices, and here we have we represented and small, this first one is like kind of a small tax, okay. So here is the size of the tax, which is really low, and here are the quantities. We see here how the quantities, they are not really affected. So here is the tax revenue, and remember this is the deadweight loss. So here we have the tax revenue, okay, which is kind of small. Here in the second case we are representing a standard tax, okay, and a standard tax. So a standard size of tax. So here we have the quantities and the deadweight loss, and this kind of median tax. So here we see here how apparently this is kind of bigger than this one, okay. And now we're going to figure out what about a large tax. This is going to be this large tax where the size is really high, and here is going to be the revenue from the government side and the deadweight loss. So what is so interesting here? First fact, let's figure out about the tax revenue. We see here apparently when the tax it goes higher, until some certain point, the tax revenue is going to be maximum. But afterwards, if you continue to charge more, more, and more, it you will finish. Actually, they are kind of equivalent, these both rectangles, so it will face a decrease. So we see here how the tax, it doesn't mean that you can charge more tax and you will receive more. No, you need to find a maximum. The government, they need to find maximum. Another important fact is about the debt uh, loss. If you see here, I don't, it maybe is not really clear, but let's think about mathematics. When you charge a higher tax, you will see here how this is a triangle, right? And the base is going to double. Okay, it's going to double, or and it's going to double. No, it's going to increase. I mean, it's going to increase. But as the base increases, the high, which is measured by Q1 by Q2, is going to increase as well. So what it means here, when the size of the tax increases here, the dead weight is going to increase higher. There's going to be like kind of a factor. So it's going to be increased higher than the size of tax. Okay? So here we can represent here through curves. Okay, the first one we're going to pay attention is going to be this one. In the x-axis we have the tax size, and this one we have the deadweight loss. We see here how when the tax size increase a little bit, the deadweight is going to increase more. And if you are into mathematics, you will see how the first derivative is going to be positive, and the second one is going to be positive as well. So this is kind of a convex. So we see how when there is an increase in the tax size, it's going to be increased higher in the deadweight loss. On the other side, we see here the deadweight loss. This one is not the deadweight loss, sorry. This is the tax revenue, which is known as the Laffer curve. So as we saw before, we see here how when the tax size increases, it reaches maximum. But if you continue to charge more, there's going to be a decrease. So you have to find the optimal point. So if you are into mathematics, you will see how this curve is positive, the first derivative until here, and automatically after the curve reaches the maximum, the first derivative is going to be negative. And we will see here how if you make the second derivative, you will see that this is negative because this is a concave shape. So this is pretty much all about the chapter 8. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it's worth, and see you in the exercises. Thank you so much, and great success with economics. Bye bye.